Thank you, Mr President. I'd like to thank those who've made a contribution this evening, the Honourable Connie Benares, the Honourable Nicola Centofanti, the Honourable Sarah Game and the Honourable Justin Hanson. I also do echo the words of the Honourable Nicola Centofanti in also thanking Mia Auckland from the PAW Project for her long-standing and indeed decade-long work on these particular issues. This bill has been a long time in the making, and in fact this is the third iteration that comes here to us after a joint House committee of the Parliament in the last Parliament that went for over a year, that took 18 submissions and had 25 witnesses, and was not the Greens bill by the end of it, was a compromise consensus bill that was agreed to by Labor, Liberal and Greens. And the bill that I brought forward was the recommendations of that committee. Of course, it looks to ensure that we lift the standards, set the standards for shelters and rescues in this state, that we see transparency in euthanasia of cats and dogs and greyhounds. But it also has some other measures in there around transparency and reporting that were requested by the RSPCA that they're still waiting on, years after they first requested them, and other minor issues in this area that really kicked down the road. We keep kicking the can down the road on these issues. It is difficult as a private member to work collaboratively and bring something forward without the transparency that we're seeking in this industry to be also reflected in the members in this place. I would say that it has been a revelation to read the Dog and Cat Management Review Act that was tabled earlier on today, and I have been making notes ever since question time, and suddenly some things are becoming clearer. But I will remind members that when I introduced this bill again, I noted in the second reading speech that I'd already had animal welfare advocates contact me because, quote, they had sought to make submissions to this long-awaited and anticipated Dog and Cat Management Act in review, but had not been able to find hide nor hair to make a pile of information of how to make a submission, how they could participate and how they could put input into this very important area. And I've got to say, reading the review, it's quite clear they were unable to. I find this an extraordinary set of affairs, and I do note that the review of the Dog and Cat Management Board was due by December last year, has finally made its way to the Parliament, but has not been out for community consultation. However, it did look at this particular issue, but it looked at it with only certain stakeholders allowed to make a contribution and others silenced by a lack of their inclusion. I find that an extraordinary state of affairs, and I think that's how we arrived to the position that we are right now with this bill. I look forward to continuing debate on this particular bill. I will invite members who do have questions at Clause 1 to put them on the record, and I'll take them on note and bring them back in a future sitting week with answers. I do indicate that I support the amendments that have been circulated by the Honourable Nicola Centofanti, one of which was simply a clerical error that got lost in translation from the report. The other is an incredibly useful contribution of including the AVA, the Australian Veterinary Association, within the prescribed organisations, and certainly, again, in the spirit of compromise, I am happy to work collaboratively with any member who would like to see this very important reform that has been literally first mooted 2017, advocated and supported by many in the community who made contributions to the Joint Committee, who were not heard in the review that we've just seen the recommendations of in the Dog and Cat Management Act report today, who may well be heard in the animal welfare review that's currently ongoing, but is due to have closed their submissions in March. So in fact that's not that far away. One should imagine that we will be able to progress this debate come April. So with that, I commend the bill to the Council and note that I welcome, should it get past the second reading stage, welcome questions in the Clause 1 stage, but then we'll be reporting progress.
So the question is that this bill be now read a second time. Those for the question say aye. Against say no. The ayes have it. Clerk.
And the Animal Welfare Act 1985 and the Dog and Cat Management Act 1995.
This bill has 23 clauses. There are some indicated amendments beginning at clause 5. Any contributions at clause 1? Oh, the Honourable Ms Franks.
I had something that I meant to say in my second reading summary, which was I take on note the issue raised by the Honourable Connie Benares, but also raised by the Law Society. I had expected, in fact, the government to come forward with that amendment with regards to clarity around the definition. So I undertake that I will bring forward that amendment myself the next time we debate this bill.
Okay. Now, we're at clause 1, contributions. The Honourable Ms Benares.
And I thank the honourable member for that clarification. Just to confirm, would that include I think there were 2 issues that the Law Society raised, so perhaps the amendment plus any clarification around the further issue that they've raised. I am hoping that when we come back to deal with this, the member might also be able to elaborate on that review process that we've touched on in terms of the Dog and Cat Management Act and the detail or lack thereof of the consultation process that she alluded to in her summation of the bill.
The Honourable Ms Franks.
I thank the Honourable Connie Benares for that particular question. Just note that I don't have a list of those who have made a contribution to the Dog and Cat Management Act 2022 review. I can see from the summary some groups have been called stakeholders and consulted, but I also am going to hazard a guess that there's quite a few who make contributions to the Joint Committee who are not consulted in this particular document. But I would ask the government if they could provide a list of the stakeholders who were consulted as part of the 2022 review of the Dog and Cat Management Act 1995 final report could be made public. That would be very useful to all in this place.
Any further contributions at clause 1? Okay. The Honourable Ms Benares.
Perhaps if I could just echo the honourable member's request in relation to that group, because that will certainly help inform the progress of this debate.
Okay. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I would also rise to indicate my support for that request also.
Okay. Would someone like to move that progress be reported?
Off you go.
Can I report progress? Absolutely.
Is that seconded? Is seconded? Put the question. Those two questions say aye, against, say no. The ayes have it.